Only I Am a Necromancer Chapter 1. Campus that Turned into Hell, 1. Commuting to school is hellish. Sung Woo Yu was often exhausted when he finally arrived at campus after transferring 3 times, which took him 2 hours each way. So, he tried his best to avoid his 9:30 a.m. class as much as possible, but it didn't work out as he wished because it was one of the required courses for his major. Oh no. How did I manage to attend school in my freshman year? I think I have to make a choice between living near school and dropping out of college, he grumbled, getting off the shuttle bus. He felt his whole body aching after the long commute. Hanno Lee, who was a year younger, teased while following him, "Hey, why are you so weak-minded as a retired squad commander of the Army Special Forces?" The other day when he drank with Hanno, Sung Woo bragged about his heroic exploits when he was in the army. After that, Hanno made fun of him whenever he had a chance. "Are you sure you were really an Army Special Forces member? Aren't you lying to me? You said you were done marching 10 kilometers quickly in full gear, right? Then why can't you stand sitting on the bus or subway for 2 hours while commuting here?" As if he felt what Hanno said was ridiculous, Sung Woo tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hanno, can't you stop preaching me until after you join the army? How long are you going to delay going to the army? Well, let me tell you one thing, Sung Woo. The unification coin will prevail." Sung Woo clicked his tongue at his strong ambitions. Damn it. What the heck are you talking about when you don't pay any attention to the news at all? You don't deserve to mention national unification. Don't you know you're in a limbo because you kept delaying joining the army because of Young? I doubt unification will ever come true when you have already broken up with her. Hanyo's face hardened at his sarcastic reply. Well, would you please not mention her? Hanno, I clearly told you at the welcoming ceremony for freshmen 3 years ago that there should not be any campus couples, right? Quote. Obviously it was impossible for a man like Hanno, who was part of a campus couple but had no military experience, to win the argument with anybody. Despite Hanyo's silence, Sung Woo kept mentioning her name while heading for the campus building for his first class. Hanno suddenly began to look in the sky blankly. "What the heck? Are you crying now?" Sung Woo asked. "No, I'm just looking at the sky." "Sky? I wonder if you're conjuring up her face there. Didn't you see those letters in the sky a moment ago?" When he said that, Sung Woo raised his head, but he saw only the cloudless blue sky. "You miss her very much, right?" "Oh, no. I clearly saw the letters only a moment ago. It said something like monster downloading. It said 99% downloading, then suddenly disappeared when it was 100%. I mean it was over there on the top of the library building." Sung Woo looked up at the sky again, but he saw only a few birds fluttering away into the sky. "Monster. Hey, dude, what kind of game did you play last night? Can't you tell reality from a dream? Oh, I'm serious. I think you saw an illusion because you have been drinking too much these days." "Ah, you think so?" Hanno easily agreed. It was true that these days he was unstable and nervous. Nonetheless, he looked at the sky several times as if he felt uncomfortable. Clicking his tongue, Sung Woo kept walking while Hanno slapped his face a couple of times and caught up with him quickly. "Hey, Sung Woo, can you get me a cup of coffee from a vending machine? I seriously need some caffeine because I feel like I'm losing my mind at the moment. I don't have time. Professor Hwang will come in at any moment. Just look at the long line before the vending machine. Are you going to swap your grade for a cup of coffee?" Even before the first class began, there was a long line before the vending machine on the first floor of the building. "Well, are you going to doze off again? Your strong mentality as a former Special Forces member will be tested again." At that moment, Hanno stopped because he knew he would be in big trouble if his tongue slipped any further. "See you at lunch then. I could end early today. By the way, I really saw the letters," Hanno said. "Stop the nonsense. Let me head out first. Talk to you later." Sung Woo took the elevator to the 4th floor and arrived at the lecture hall. When he came in, the professor also arrived right on time. "Oops, I feel sleepy." Was it because he didn't have coffee or was he so rusty after being discharged from the army and coming back to school only recently? In no time he felt sleepy as he could not concentrate on the lecture. Quote. He heard the professor's voice vaguely, and his eyelids were heavy. His shoulders felt stiff, but he blamed it for his hellish commute to school. Right at that moment, he saw some strange letters floating in the air. "Less than what is the best job in the ruined world. Choose right now, greater than." Ugh. What the heck? He felt he was hallucinating while dozing off. He blinked his eyes, then roughly rubbed them. But the hologram message before his eyes didn't disappear. Tick, tick, tick. At that moment, the monitor that was printing out the class material flickered, then all the fluorescent lights went out. Wong tilde. Ugh. What the heck is this? Is it a blackout? What? I don't see anything. It was not a simple blackout. As if the sun had gone out or one was thrown into the cosmos, the whole world plunged into darkness. Sungwoo curled up in an attempt to defend himself against the contingencies. Even my mobile phone is off. What the heck is going on? By the way, what the heck is this? I can see myself only here. Me too. One thing was clearly visible. It was the holographic message that Sungwoo mistakenly regarded as a hallucination. It seemed that all the students in the hall saw the same thing. Less than you only have 15 seconds left, greater than. Oh my, what is this? 15 seconds of what? Bright light shined before their eyes, and then the 10 cards began to spin. Just like a spinning wheel or conveyor belt sushi, the cards came so close as if they could touch them, then quickly moved away clockwise. The cards had all sorts of pictures with various colored backgrounds. You guys see these cards too? Hey, guys, don't touch them recklessly. He is right. Don't touch them. They're dangerous. Nobody knew why it was dangerous to touch them. They just avoided the cards instinctively. But Sungwoo harbored another doubt. Isn't it more dangerous to not do anything now? Who knows what'll happen after 15 seconds? Less than you've got only 10 seconds, greater than. Does it mean we have to choose a card? One card had the drawing of a fighter with a sword and a shield, another one with a wizard holding a cane, and another one with an archer holding an arrow. These 3 cards each had a star on the white background. Another one had 2 stars on a green background, which looked like a priest in Sungwoo's eyes. Was he a castle knight drawn on the card with 3 stars on the pink background? Sungwoo tried his best to understand this ridiculous situation. Only 7 seconds were left. What was this countdown forcing him to do? What the heck is this? Is it similar to poker? What am I supposed to decide within this time frame? At that moment, one card with the drawing of a fighter, which was off in the distance, disappeared with a poof. And then, bump. Ugh. What the heck is this? A sword suddenly dropped onto Sungwoo's friend's desk, who was sitting in front of him. I wonder if it was dropped by the fighter on the card. Only I Am a Necromancer Chapter 2, Campus That Turned Into Hell, 2. Although Sungwoo could not understand what was going on, he had only 5 seconds left. Wait a minute. Wasn't there a reminder that I should choose a good card in order to survive in the ruined world? Sungwoo reached out for a card unconsciously. He picked up the one with the most stars. Although he had no rational ground for choosing that one, he felt like he wanted to choose it if he had to anyway. The card he picked up seemed unusual at first glance. With the black background, it had the drawing of a man in a white robe holding a long sickle. Less than you chose an occupation card. Necromancer, greater than. Necromancer. Isn't Necromancer a wizard who controls skeletons or corpses in the fantasy world? Less than your first occupation selection window has now closed. Those who failed to choose one, please wait for the next chance, greater than. The card selection ended with that message, and all the messages disappeared. Then the lecture hall became bright again, and the electricity came back. Crackle. At that moment, the guy in front of Sungwoo began to gently raise the sword off the desk. The sharp blade flashed under the fluorescent lights. Quote. The lecture hall was quiet. Everybody fixed their eyes on the sword with embarrassed looks. Where did it fall from? What happened a moment ago? I feel like I was possessed by something. And, what the heck is that sword? Is it a real sword? Oh my god. I'm scared. The lecture hall suddenly became noisy after a lapse of silence. Even the professor was looking out the window as if he was completely distracted by this mysterious phenomenon. Sungwoo could not grasp the situation, but he was still bothered by the holographic message that said, fit to survive in the ruined world. The whole text containing the message felt ominous to him. This dropped when I chose the card with the drawing of the fighter, said the guy in front of Sungwoo, raising the sword. Hearing that, Sungwoo looked up at the ceiling. Dang it. Am I really a necromancer? Why is nothing appearing before me? Right at that moment, the back door of the lecture hall flung open suddenly, and something came in with a bang. It was a man covered with blood. Ah! Get this out of me. Blood gushed out of his neck and sprayed over his shirt. And there was something stuck on his back. A small green-skinned animal recklessly brandished a deadly weapon with its right hand, grabbing his hair with its left hand. Puck, 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 puck. The little knife was stabbed in the man's back and neck indiscriminately. He tried to resist the attack by all means, but he staggered dangerously as if he had bled too much. Oh my god. What the heck is that? Ah! The lecture hall turned into a mess all of a sudden. Terrified by the scene, all the students began fleeing the front of the hall, pushing and shoving the desks which screeched all over the place. It was the crucible of chaos itself. Yush! The bloody man finally collapsed. Watching with his dilated pupils, Sungwoo held his breath and took his butt off the chair slowly. Dang it! As he was sitting in the seat right in front of the back door, he could hardly move because he felt like it could draw the monster's attention. The green monster roared over the man's body. Then it turned its head quickly, rolling its yellow eyes. It was obviously looking for its next prey. Ah! Sword! Hey, Minsu! Use the sword! Minsu, do something about it. Please! Amid the chaotic situation, they began to look for Minsu, the only man holding the sword. And all of them hid behind his back. Sungwoo also cautiously stood up and looked at him anxiously. Sungwoo was now the closest person to the green monster. How can I? You have the sword. But it seemed that Minsu had no intention of challenging the monster at all. He was holding the sword with both hands, but he was trembling hard. Hey, Minsu, you remember me, right? Standing in place, Sungwoo called his name in a calm tone. Though both of them were not close friends, they knew each other. God damn it. What do you want me to do? Ah. As he reacted violently, Sungwoo immediately felt that it was impossible to persuade him. After all, the monster turned to Sungwoo, who was close by, and ran into him. Sungwoo wished he had escaped quickly, but it was too late. The green monster turned up its mouth slightly, then charged toward him. Ah! Sungwoo screamed sharply, but he decided to challenge the monster rather than flee because he recalled the bloody man who was stabbed by the monster on its back. I'm done for if I show my back to the monster. And his choice of action was efficient. Bam! The little monster, which weighed about 15 kilograms, was knocked out by his front kick. The monster hysterically stood up with its hands on the floor. But Sungwoo took the next action. Get the fuck out of here, son of a bitch. He was about to lift his chair while shouting like that, but he got in trouble. Ugh. As it turned out, the chair was part of the so-called all-in-one desk, cited as the college student's public enemy No. 1 as well as the worst invention. Besides, it was much heavier than he thought. Sungwoo, who was holding onto the back of the chair, failed to lift it on the first try. Ah! The monster didn't lose the chance to attack him this time. It lowered its position, then stuck out its hand that was holding a knife. Obviously it was determined not to suffer another kick. Damn it! Fuming, he grabbed the lower part of the desk and lifted it effortlessly like a weightlifter. Normally he could have never done it, but he showed superhuman power faced with the possibility of imminent death. Then he struck its head with the desk chair rather than throwing it. The monster came close right up to his nose, stretching the knife, but it could not do anything when struck against the heavy desk chair. Struck hard, it stuck out its tongue with its broken head. At first glance, it was killed on the spot. Less than you got 10 gold by knocking down the goblin, greater than. Ha! Breathing out roughly, Sungwoo stepped back. Looking back, the scared students were watching him. Goblin. 10 gold. No way. The little green monster was like the low-level goblins that often appeared in fantasy. Gold. Although he could not figure out what it was clear that the world around him began to spin like a fantasy game. Another message appeared before his eyes. Less than the dead have become your subordinate under your authority, greater than. List of subordinates. Goblin skeleton, LV.1. Weapon, dagger. Species, goblin. Trait, undead. Ugh. Subordinate. What the heck was this? But the faces of the students packed in front of the hall began to contort with fear. Ah. Oh no. Ugh. Look back. Sungwoo turned his head like them. Rattle tilde. A goblin was standing up after pushing the desk chair. Precisely speaking, it was a skeleton with its skin and intestines smashed to ashes. Then it slowly walked towards Sungwoo and knelt before him. Ah. It was a difficult situation for him. While watching it bitterly, he recalled the occupation he chose. Necromancer. Necromancers controls the dead. And the subordinates he resurrected obeyed him absolutely. It was a concept commonly found in the fantasy genre. No way. Squeak. At that moment, 2 more goblins appeared through the back door. Another appeared again. This time there are 2 goblins. While the lecture hall was chaotic with the stunned students screaming, Sungwoo looked at the skeleton and the 2 goblins alternately. Then a new message appeared before his eyes. Less than your subordinates are waiting for your order, greater than. Sungwoo was thinking of ordering them to fight, but even before he opened his mouth, the skeleton raised its body and began to walk toward the goblins stoutly. The goblins were hesitating before the skeleton as if they found a kindred spirit in it. But the skeleton stabbed the sword into their heads. Only I Am a Necromancer Chapter 3, Campus That Turned into Hell, 3. The skeleton moved according to Sungwoo's intuition. In other words, it did what he wanted by checking his preferences in advance even when he didn't want to control it consciously. It was fighting a deadly fight with the two goblins on his behalf now. Woof! The skeleton pulled a dagger out of the goblins. It seemed that the attack was not fatal, as if the dagger had missed the mark a bit. Then the two goblins indiscriminately began to wield the swords at the skeleton that had been resurrected like them. But their swords, originally designed to cut apart human flesh, didn't seem to deal any damage to the skeleton. It seemed that the skeleton's durability was not that strong. Its right elbow was smashed by the goblin's clumsy attack. Now with its left hand as the only weapon, the skeleton was on the defensive. Sungwoo began to feel nervous while watching the fight. If I don't go to its rescue, I have to face them again. When he confronted the goblin, he felt that it was not a formidable rival. Besides, the goblin's build was as small as a child. But it would be tough for him to fight several goblins this time. So, he thought he had to preclude such possibilities. I wish I had a good weapon. Turning his head, Sungwoo looked at Minsu. He was standing there awkwardly, gripping the sword with both hands. Sungwoo could not find any righteous spirit in him. Hey, give me the sword quickly. Right now. Minsu opened his eyes wide at his yelling. Then he hugged the sword he had stuck out. What? Why do you need it? Minsu asked. Give it to me quickly. Let me kill them with it. But Minsu shook his head and said, Nope, this is mine. I got this by selecting the card. What the heck? Sungwoo was dumbfounded to hear that. He was aware that Minsu was not sociable, but how could he claim such ridiculous ownership of the sword in this situation? Then, you go out and kill them yourself. Ugh. When he said that, Minsu's face turned white. You don't want to, dickhead. Sungwoo didn't force him to hand it over. He knew he would be in bigger trouble than now if he touched such a timid guy. Based on his experience as a retired sergeant, it was best to not touch someone acting like an advisor. That's fine. Go and peel potatoes with that. What did you say? This time, Sungwoo also lifted the desk with a chair. At that moment, the skeleton, with its only functional left hand, stepped aside as if it had been waiting for his move. Oh, you already know what I'm going to do. Sungwoo then threw the desk toward the goblins. They fell to the floor, struck by the heavy desk. Seizing the chance, the skeleton sprang out at them and skillfully stabbed the sword in their necks and bellies. Puck, puck, puck. Less than you've earned 10 gold by hunting a goblin, greater than. Less than you've earned 10 gold by hunting a goblin, greater than. While a total of 2 messages came out, the skeleton killed the 2 goblins at the same time and the lecture hall turned into a sea of blood. When the fight was over, the one-armed skeleton waddled toward Sungwoo and looked up at him blankly just like a puppy thirsty for praise. Well, I'm sorry, but I feel bad. Can you look somewhere else? Even though it was his ally, Sungwoo felt unpleasant when the skeleton poked its skull at him. It bowed its head at his request. I wonder if the skeleton was disappointed in me. As he could not read any feelings in its hollow eyes, Sungwoo checked its face, fearing that it could change its mind. Ah, since it has no eyes, I can't check its feelings anyway. Less than the dead have become the subordinates under your authority greater than. A list of your subordinates, 3/3. Goblin skeleton, LV.1. Goblin skeleton, LV.1. Goblin skeleton, LV.1. Tap for further information about the attribute of each member. You have reached the maximum number of subordinates. The 2 goblins were resurrected as skeletons in no time. Then they gathered around Sungwoo, making a clattering noise. Now a total of 3 skeletons followed him. Hey, Sungwoo, what happened? The middle-aged professor asked. Although he was shocked by the absurd situation like everybody else, the professor felt Sungwoo seemed sober. On the other hand, the professor was full of doubt, which was understandable, given that Sungwoo was now controlling the monsters that popped up suddenly. But like everybody else there, Sungwoo could not understand the absurd situation either. I have no idea, but... His words drifted while he was concentrating on the noise around him. Then he turned his head outside the window. While silence reigned the lecture hall, he could feel that the whole campus was full of screams. He could hear horrible shrieks and screams outside the window, in the hallway and upstairs. It seems that the same thing is happening throughout the whole campus. Or maybe it. Professor. I can't get through to the police station with my mobile phone. Shouted a female student whom Sungwoo didn't know. Like she said, this kind of situation was common in horror films. In other words, all the lines to the police stations were busy at the moment. Was it happening across the country or the whole world? While Sungwoo thought about that possibility, some of the students stricken with fear began to open the front door and ran out. We should not stay here. Let's get out of campus. Right. Where is my car? Oh, let's go to the parking lot. In Sungwoo's judgment, they were too hasty. As expected, they began to shout, "Ugh! Ah! Let's get out of here." They were watching something at the end of the hallway where the little monsters screamed and wailed. Rattle. The skeletons now began to run toward the back door. Although Sungwoo didn't issue any orders, they acted as if to reflect his subconsciousness. The 3 skeletons kicked the 2 goblins on the side when they were charging at the students. Tangled up together in the hallway, they began to fight fiercely among themselves. While they were pushing and shoving, the skeletons began to suffer some cracks in their bones. Crunch. Obviously, the skeletons were on the defensive when it came to the gripping fight. They had no muscles to show their strength, and they weighed less than the goblins. "Everybody, get out of here. Let me stop them here. I mean those guys." Running around in confusion, the students began to disperse and head for the hallway on the opposite side. In a situation like this, scattering was not always a good option, but it was not good for them to gather in one place either. Besides, it was impossible to confine those stricken with fear to any specific place. Sungwoo had no obligation to protect them anyway. Yeah, they had the right to make their own choice. Sungwoo also agonized over what kind of option he would choose. Right now everything is unclear, but there is a rule in this game. I should follow it. He was given an occupation, while his abilities and the appearance of the monsters could be called his game. This might be a very stupid idea, but perhaps the more I fight against them, the higher the chances of my survival will be. So, Sungwoo made the choice to fight instead of fleeing. He could make the bold decision because he had subordinates to fight on his behalf. If he had received a sword by choosing the fighter card, he would certainly have not made this decision. Puck. Puck. Sungwoo watched the bloody fighting between the skeletons and goblins before his eyes. Tangled up together, all they did in the fight was grab and stab each other, but as they had no particular fighting skills, their battle was more intense. Bam! Right at that moment, one of the skeleton's necks was smashed, and its skull rolled down to its feet. Less than your subordinate will now go back to its eternal death, greater than. Please defeat them. Gulping, Sungwoo watched the dogfight anxiously. It seemed like there was little difference in the performance between the goblin skeleton and that of the living goblin. Only I Am a Necromancer Chapter 4, Campus That Turned into Hell, 4. Numerically speaking, the skeletons were superior to them. Although one of the skeletons fell, the 2 goblins were already broken into pieces. Less than you have earned 10 gold by hunting the goblin, greater than. Less than you have earned 10 gold by hunting the goblin, greater than. Phew. Good job. Sungwoo shouted hooray in spite of himself. Then there was a message that possibly signaled the start of a real game. Less than you have leveled up. LV.2, greater than. Level. When the word level was mentioned, it meant that he should now be ready for the real game. It was the moment Sungwoo confirmed the validity of his prediction that the more he fought, the stronger he would become. He recited it to himself quietly as if he could not believe it. Quote ... Status bar. When he said that, a holographic window appeared before his eyes. Less than player profile greater than. Name, Sungwoo Yu. Level, 2. Occupation, Necromancer. Capability, Muscle Power, 5, Agility, 5, Physical Strength, 5. Earned gold, 50. But there was nothing like stats in the game. Didn't players receive stats when their level went up? But his question was answered when a system window popped up. Less than select your level up card, greater than. Stats, random. Skill, random. Item, random. Other, random. Muscle power increase, confirmed. A total of 5 cards appeared before my eyes. Except for 5, they were all on the backside, so he found out that by using this, he could reinforce my stats, learn skills, or obtain items. Random. But most of them were random. The last one, namely number 5, was the confirmed stats, but it suggested that luck played a big role from the start. After agonizing for some time, Sungwoo chose skills, the number 2 item. Skill was one of the most important elements in most games, so he chose it because he was not sure what would come out of it. Less than the maximum number of subordinates will increase by 1, greater than. Then the skeletons began to rise from a heap of bodies. This time there was a total of 5 with the addition of 1 more. Rattle. Less than you are almost out of mana, greater than. Mana. It seemed that he needed mana when he had to use skills to summon skeletons. So, when Sungwoo recalled mana, he saw a certain gauge before his eyes. Less than mana, 3/30, greater than. The mana then increased to 4. It seemed like he didn't need a lot of mana to summon just 1 skeleton. Hey, you guys are not playing hard to get, are you? When he said that, 4 goblins looked up at him all at once. Dang it, you really suck. I'm sorry to say this, but can you all just look down instead? They again looked down at his request. Good job. After a tough battle with the goblins, Sungwoo was left alone. Precisely speaking, he was left with 4 skeletons. He put his head against the cold iron gate, then took it off. He did it to cool down his head, but it didn't help. As he had been staying alert, he felt heartburn as if acid from his stomach was forced up the gullet. Okay, I should stay alert to survive. If I'm clumsy here, I can make a mistake. I don't know what's going on, but so far, so good, right? Sungwoo reassured himself like that. As someone who was discharged from the army recently, he was well aware that those who adapted themselves quickly to a strange environment could survive better than those who didn't. When he was in the army, there were 2 groups of recruits thrown into a strange environment, namely those who could easily adapt and earn their commander's trust, and those who ended up as outcasts by failing to adapt. Above all, let me survive. I have to think of that only. Hearing the strange screaming echoing down the hallway, he patted his cheek slightly, then took 3 deep breaths. Phew. Let me buck up and get out of here. The lecture hall was located on the 4th floor of the Humanity and Social Sciences building. Sungwoo checked the situation outside the window. The cafe streets below the building were lined with bodies, and dozens of goblins were running around, screeching. Damn it. I feel safer here. I don't think I should go down there. But he could not stay here forever. With the skeletons walking ahead of him, he cautiously headed 1 floor down. Ah! Right at that moment, somebody wielding a dagger walked out of the 3rd floor, stunned. That dagger cut through the skull bones of 1 skeleton, but that was it. Ugh! Sungwoo! Ah, Hano! It was none other than Hano who was holding the dagger. Sungwoo felt relieved when he met the familiar face. But Hano was still full of alertness. What the heck are these? Asked Hano. Oh, don't worry. How can I describe them? My bodyguard. Are you sure? After agonizing over how to explain, he opened his mouth. Hano, did you choose an occupation card too? Ah, card. Oh, you're right. Well, I chose one with the drawing of a thief. Why did you choose such a damn thing? How many stars were on the card? While trembling hard, Hano agonized over his question seriously. Stars. Oh, I got only 1 star. 1 star is a brigadier general, right? It's good, right? Sungwoo let out a sigh. He knew Hanhu was an innocent junior, though he was a bit dumb. And Sungwoo could guess his personality in this difficult situation. Well, just think that way. Let's go down to a safe place. We will be safe with these guys walking ahead of us. Then the skeletons began to step down, rattling as they went. Sungwoo and Hano followed them. When they arrived on the 2nd floor, there was a 1-line message before their eyes. Less than your team fights will have the synergy effect from now on, greater than. Synergy list. Dagger Thief Group, 1st stage. Class, Weapon Synergy. Condition, 5 daggers loaded. Effect, probability of fatality, plus 10%, gold accumulation, plus 10%. Ugh. Do you also see this? Yep. Synergy. The meaning was clear. It seemed that they received buffs with the gathering of similar patterns. In other words, the more teamwork they had, the more benefits they would get. But the thing is whether we can get this with these skeletons, which are not humans. 4 of the daggers that created the synergy of less than Dagger Thief Group, 5, greater than were held by the skeletons. I am not sure yet, but they are quite useful. Even if I move alone, I can create the effect of several people moving, right? I think I chose the good one. Now the situation was clear where the increase in stats was given randomly. The most important factor in survival was luck. Sungwoo thought he was very lucky from the beginning, but at that moment he ran into a group of goblins coming up from the 1st floor stairs. There were as many as 7. Squeak. The one far behind them was twice as big as the other goblins, carrying a string of Buddhist prayer beads around its neck. Besides, it was holding a long spear in its hand. Hey, that bastard seems like their chief, doesn't it? Having said that, Hano stepped back. Sungwoo was ready to flee if things went wrong. No matter how hard he thought, he could not beat the gang of 7 goblins. But wasn't survival decided by sheer luck? Less than the gang of goblins is now weakened after smelling the smell of death, 1st stage. Stats have decreased by 30%. This occurs when they run into more than 4 skeletons, greater than. At that moment, the gang of goblins was hesitant, then they began to move back. The anger disappeared from their faces. Instead, they were full of fear. Aren't we lucky? Then the 4 skeletons began to walk down the stairs with their loud rattling. The moment the goblins fell under the curse and Sungwoo became strongly determined, the skeletons began to charge towards the goblins. Rattle, rattle. They raced down the stairs without any hesitation and stormed the goblins. Squeak! Squeak! The goblins that caught the smell of death were very slow to respond, as if their bodies were frozen. The skeletons caught up and stabbed the daggers into them. One of them rolled off the stairs and was pushed out when stabbed. Wow! Good job! Only I Am a Necromancer Chapter 5, Campus That Turned Into Hell, 5. Hanno, who was about to run away at any time, admired the spectacular fight scene. In fact, he was only thinking of running away from the monsters after this happened. He had no other choice to survive because he never thought of confronting them like this. Never did he think he could fight by using the enemy's bodies. At that moment, the bulky goblin lifted its left hand right away. Squeak! As soon as it did so, the bracelet on its forearm began to shine. It was an ominous sign at first glance. Less than the chief of the goblin group has initiated the madness of the wildness. Its minions are now strengthened, greater than. At the same time, the scared goblin's eyes began to emit red light. Squeak! As if the curse spell of the smell of death was broken, the goblin's actions were now more flexible, and they began to push the skeletons up the stairs. Hanno, feeling nervous, murmured, Sungwoo, shall we run away now? Wait a minute. If the skeletons are destroyed, Hanno and Sungwoo will be doomed. If both of them joined hands and fought together, they could beat them, but Sungwoo didn't want to take the risk. The reason he decided to fight the goblins was because he could guarantee his safety with the skeletons at the forefront to fight them. I've got to control these skeletons because they're supposed to move according to my instructions. Now, what should I do? At that moment, the chief goblin's hand came into his view. It was lifting its left hand and spinning it in the air, but the bracelet on it was very strange. Yep, that's it. The skeleton that had been created first stepped back. Even without one of its hands, because it was smashed to pieces, the skeleton jumped into the air after stepping on its colleagues' backs. Rattle. Ugh. Are you going to jump here? Based on Sungwoo's judgment, the skeleton took a very aggressive action, which even he didn't expect at all. Falling down rapidly, it brandished its hands straight down. Its dagger cut the chief goblin's left wrist instantly. Then the red energy of the bracelet disappeared, and the goblin gang was stricken with fear again. Stunned, the chief goblin kicked the skeleton, which bounced out and rolled down the first floor. Nonetheless, it seized the chance to win with that single attack. Less than you've earned 10, plus 1, gold by hunting the goblin, greater than. The skeletons, which might look like resurrected zombies to the goblins, stabbed them recklessly and emotionlessly. Puck, 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 puck. Sometimes there were yellow sparkles coupled with the blunt sounds, which suggested that the goblins were given a fatal blow because of the synergy effect of less than dagger thief gang, 5, greater than. Less than you have earned 10, plus 1, gold by hunting the goblins, greater than. The goblins collapsed all at once. The stairs leading from the second floor to the first were full of blood, which dripped down the stairs. Less than you have earned 10, plus 1, gold by hunting the goblins, greater than. Less than you have earned 10, plus 1, gold by hunting the goblins, greater than. Less than you have earned 10, plus 1, gold by hunting the goblins, greater than. As a result, 6 out of the 7 goblins were all killed, and only the chief goblin survived. It smashed one of the skeletons by wielding the long spear, but that was it. 2 skeletons were spinning around it, stabbing its belly ruthlessly. In the end, it collapsed in a pool of blood, moaning. Less than you have earned 50, plus 5, by hunting the chief goblin, greater than. Wow, wow, ha ha ha. As if he was dumbfounded, Hanno began to laugh frivolously. Sungwoo slowly walked down the bloody stairs and checked the chief goblin's body. Sungwoo, don't you earn something like items in this case? Yep. Sungwoo was on the same page. When the gamers hunted goblins, they usually received items. And his guess was right. Gold sparkled on the chief goblin's sliced left forearm and the spear he used. It seemed as if the items were shouting, "I'm here," so Sungwoo could claim them. Less than item description greater than. Name, crude spear. Grade, general. Classification, one-handed spear. Effect, increases attack speed of small build, friendly forces, plus 20%. Sungwoo put the bracelet on his left wrist, which immediately brought about the effects of the item. Less than the attack speed of goblin skeleton has increased. Plus 20%, greater than. It seemed that the small build referred to the goblin. And Sungwoo enjoyed seeing another unexpected effect. Less than you can use the buff skill, because the conditions have been met. Activation condition, Goblin mercenaries, greater than. Less than skill information greater than. Name, Madness of the Wilderness. Grade, D. Classification, buff. Effect, when used, the Goblin mercenaries will increase their attacks, plus 10%, and attack speed, plus 20%, for 10 minutes. After that, the cooldown will take 1 hour greater than. It seemed that Sungwoo had obtained a very good weapon because the moment the chief goblin used it, he saw the goblin gang's power becoming much stronger than before. I think I obtained a lot. Since it was a very dangerous battle, he felt like he was rewarded amply. Rattle. At that moment, the one-armed skeleton walked up the stairs with a waddling gait. It was the first to be born as a skeleton, and it cut the chief goblin's wrist. Right after its attack, it was kicked hard by the chief goblin and fell down the stairs, smashing 2 of its ribs. Although its body was covered with wounds, it seemed to be more sophisticated. Sungwoo put his hand on its skull as if he felt proud of it. Good job. But he pulled his hand back immediately because he still felt uncomfortable. Then it made a loud noise by gnashing its teeth together as if it was satisfied. Tick, tick. Ugh. What did you do a moment ago? Don't do it again. When Sungwoo ordered it, the skeleton stopped doing it, leaving its jaws wide open. It looked really ugly. Sungwoo, where shall we go now? Well, let's get out of here first. Both of them went to the first floor, then headed for the lobby. They confirmed that people had gathered in front of the main gate of the building. You guys go into the copy room over there, skeletons. If they see you, they might be so shocked that they will kill you. You're right. I'm sorry to say this, but I also struck them on the head in the spur of the moment. I think people will scream at the sight of these skeletons. In fact, Hanno had wielded the dagger first, thinking that the skeletons were monsters. Fortunately, Hanno was on close terms with Sungwoo, but those who were scared of the skeletons would not be persuaded. When Sungwoo opened the door of the copy room, the skeletons went inside in a single file line. If anybody opened the door by mistake, he or she could pass out. But who would come to this place to make a photocopy? There were about 30 people gathered in the lobby. Given that only 5 of them were holding weapons, it was obvious that there were only a few who could take action when the unidentified cards appeared. Come to think of it, it was abnormal for them to reach out for such strange cards. Come on, everybody. Please come down. We're contacting the police now, and members of the student council are also checking out what happened. A man wearing the student council jumper was shouting at him, with a sword in his right hand and a shield in his left. What can the student council do in this situation? Just break open the door. One female student, who was about to cry, shouted at him. But the executive member of the student council shook his head and said, well, we tried to break it open in every way, but it didn't break no matter how hard we struck it. Really? The door can't be broken. The main door was an ordinary glass door. But the student council executive nodded at her question resolutely. Nope, it won't. So, please calm down and lower your voice so the monsters won't approach us. Please follow my instructions. Sungwoo naturally mingled in with them. Are you Sungwoo? Only I am a Necromancer Chapter 6, Campus that Turned into Hell, 6. One of the executive members of the student council pretended to recognize him. Sungwoo also recognized him. He was Jin-Sok Lee, and he was 2 years ahead of him in the same department. When Sungwoo was a freshman, Jin-Suk was in the same group when they went on a department outing. Sungwoo didn't have good memories of him, though. Basically Jin-Sok was an old fossil who insisted on hierarchy. He was also notorious for hitting on girls in the department. Since he was very covetous of a title, he joined the student council. Oh, hello. Exchanging formal greetings with him, Sungwoo cautiously approached the main door. He was curious as to why Jin-Sok could not open it. At the moment, however, Jin-Sok made an annoying expression and shouted, hey! Don't approach the door. It's dangerous. Damn it. He made a big fuss out of it and waved at Sungwoo annoyingly, so Sungwoo stepped back. Jin-Sok let out a sigh, then suddenly made a benevolent expression like a saint. Phew, I'm sorry. I'm a bit on the edge because I have to pay attention to lots of stuff at the moment. I don't know what's going on, but I have to protect our students. Well, this is close to an excessive sense of duty. Did Jin-Sok show this conceited attitude because he was an executive member of the student council? Sungwoo began to feel like he was a nuisance. Sungwoo, did you also choose a card? Yes, that's right. Both of us chose the cards. You know Hanno, right? Hello, Jin-Sok. Oh, I think I've seen you at a certain event before, Hanno. I'm so busy I can't attend classes often. Sungwoo wanted to retort, why are you attending school then? Because you want to wear that student council uniform, but he did not have the heart to speak out. Anyway, you know the current situation is very serious, right? If you have weapons, you should help me protect our students. Sure, we'll help you. By the way, what is your occupation? Someone like a spearman. Well, are you sure you can help me? Looking at Sungwoo holding a crude spear, Jinsok made a frown. Obviously he looked at Sungwoo with contempt. In fact, Sungwoo himself thought his weapon was worthless compared with the weapons those in other occupations were holding. But his real weapons were clustered about inside the copy room. Well, I don't need to bother to tell him about it. Sungwoo nodded lightly. I caught a green monster. It's called a goblin. It's tough to confront it even if I have a weapon, Jinsok said, lifting the shield proudly, and I've chosen a very good card. It is a shield fighter with 2 stars. If anything happens to you, just hide behind me. Sure, replied Sungwoo half-heartedly. He thought it ridiculous for Jinsok to brag about the 2 stars, and he didn't want to look condescending by arguing that his card had more stars. At that moment, someone came to Jinsok hurriedly, panting and huffing. Sir, I hear the goblins making some faint noise on the stairs. He was none other than Minsu, who acted cowardly in the lecture hall. It seemed that he was acting as Jinsok's minion at the moment, but what the heck did he mean by goblins making faint noise? Sungwoo barely held the urge to poo-poo it. Anyway, Jinsok appreciated his service by patting him on the shoulder, then strode toward them arrogantly, so much so that one could feel something like heroic resolve in his gait. Come down, everybody, please be quiet. The upper floors are crawling. Please hide yourselves inside the cafe slowly. We're going to guard the entrance. Jinsok's mention of goblins had a chilling effect. Tight-lipped, they began to shuffle into the cafe. Hey, Hano, come here. In the meantime, Sungwoo and Hano approached the main entrance, avoiding Jinsok's gaze. Why was he calling their bluff, warning him not to approach with the excuse that he could not break open the glass door? Do you see that, Sungwoo? Yes. Like Hano said, there was a holographic mark on the doorknob, which was a pink chain icon. Less than it's sealed with a strong magical power. The door will be opened only when you attack the boss monster at the building. If you fail to attack within the allotted time, the monsters inside the building will be strengthened. 2 hours 11 minutes and 19 seconds, greater than. Boss. 2 hours and 11 minutes. Sungwoo pulled the doorknob with a jerk, but it would not budge. Sungwoo, I wonder if this is a timed attack. Aren't we all going to perish if we don't kill the monsters within that time frame? I'm not sure how the monsters are going to be strengthened, but we obviously have to kill them to get out of here. Don't ever think foolishly that anybody will come to our rescue. In a situation like this, they could not hope for the arrival of the police. Anybody who failed to stay awake would be the first to be killed. Sungwoo and Hano approached Jinsok again. Jinsok opened his mouth, looking at Minsu and Sungwoo. You know each other, right? Both of you are from the class of 2015, right? Yes, we are, replied Minsu coldly. He seemed to have felt offended when Sungwoo reproached him in the lecture hall. Good. I feel more secure as both of you are under my authority like now. Let's stay alert and stick it out well, Jinsok said proudly as if he were a general who burned the bridge behind him. Then he patted the 3 men on the shoulder one by one. But Sungwoo tilted his head at his last words. Wait a minute, did you say we would stick it out? Right here. Yes. What's wrong with that? Jinsok hysterically retorted. Basically, he hated it when his juniors talked back. You saw the message on the door, right? Of course I did. We have to stay here until the rescue team arrives because we can't get out of here. Rescue team? Do you think the police can come now? If the same thing is happening around the country, it's impossible for the police to pay attention to us. Hey, you served in the military before, right? Of course. Then how come you don't know it? The army will move to free us. Everything will be all right then. No, that was his vague wishful thinking. It was impossible for the army to help people in every corner of the land. Of course, it was possible that they could get the army's help, but it was impossible to expect their help within 2 hours. It was too complacent to stay still when nobody knew what would happen in 2 hours. Sungwoo realized it once again after taking a dim view of Jinsok's complacent attitude. Sungwoo murmured to himself, I've got to wake up and smell the coffee, then adapt myself to the situation accordingly. I'll be put in danger if I act passively with complacency. Without replying, Sungwoo let out a sigh. Jinsok fumed at that. Did you just sigh? Damn it, I can't stand it. You stay out of this. If you want to survive, just stand still. Got it. Right at that moment, Minsu stepped back stunned. He shouted, Jinsok. Go, goblin. Squeak. Squeak. About 8 goblins were running down the central stairs. Ugh. Oops. Right over there. Everybody in the cafe stood up in alarm. There was only one entrance to the cafe, so they could not run away. Jinsok lifted the shield with his trembling hands. Anybody with a weapon, come here. Come to the entrance of the cafe. We've got to stop them. But Minsu yelled again, completely freaking out. Ah. Jinsok, over there. They're also coming from the hallway. Damn it, what the fuck are they? Jinsok stiffened at the goblins in the shape of scrawny skeletons. Sungwoo whispered, they're not evil. What did you say? Sungwoo stood at the entrance of the cafe. Jinsok, I know you have a strong sense of responsibility, but please wake up and smell the coffee. If a silly guy tries to act like a commander, he might kill others. What the heck did you say? What the fuck is your occupation? Something good. Only I Am a Necromancer Chapter 7, Boss Monster of Humanities and Social Science Building, 1. Having said that, Sungwoo then left the cafe. The 8 goblins stood frozen on the spot as if they had run into a beast. Then they even screamed and stepped back. Squeak, squeak. It was because of the smell of death, peculiar to the Necromancer. But the goblins seemed to be scared by Sungwoo's appearance in the eyes of Jinsok and the other people. Soon, their hunting began. Rattle, rattle. The sound of clattering bones echoed horrifyingly. Those stuck in the cafe were just speechless with their faces frozen, watching the scene through the glass windows. 4 skeletons began to massacre the 8 goblins ruthlessly. What the heck is this? Even Jinsok, who was holding his shield, shuddered at the fighting. He thought he would be killed the moment the goblins appeared. He was even thinking of running away at an opportune time. But Sungwoo went forward holding the crude spear in one hand, and began to kill the goblins, escorted by the skeletons. Blocked the stairs to stop them from fleeing. When Sungwoo shouted, the one-armed skeleton went round and stood on the first step of the stairs. Good job. Keep on blocking them. In fact, Sungwoo didn't need to shout at the skeleton, but he did so to show everybody that the skeletons were not dangerous. They were under his control and he was the very man who could resolve the situation right now. Only I can succeed in attacking the boss monster. Sungwoo intended to kill the boss within the given time frame and escape from the building. He thought that was the rule of the game, and the safest way. Puck, 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 puck. One of the goblins fell down at the crit. Although it was only a 10% increase in probability, he received the bonus for his attack speed, so he got the buff frequently. Less than special effects currently in use greater than. Synergy, Dagger Thieves Gang. Critical strike chance, plus 10%, gold accumulation, plus 10%. Item, Madness of the Wilderness. Attack speed increase when dealing with goblins, plus 20%. If I use the buffs from the bracelet, I don't think the goblins are a danger, no matter how many appear. Sungwoo had already adapted to the situation and analyzed it. But the goblins alone aren't my enemy. Stronger monsters will come out in the future. It didn't matter to him why or how such monsters appeared because he could not figure it out even if he agonized over it. What was important to him right now was to fight the goblins and survive. In the meantime, those stuck in the cafe were watching Sungwoo fighting the goblins anxiously. The guy over there is now ordering the skeletons, right? I think so. Although they could not understand the situation at all, what was happening before their eyes was true. They began to feel relieved gradually, watching him controlling the situation. How fortunate we are. Who is he, by the way? What's his major? Ugh. He seems to be my senior in the department. Now they not only felt relieved that they survived, but they also realized that Sungwoo had saved them. It was sort of their instinct for survival because they wanted to have someone as their guide instinctively in a life or death situation. As Sungwoo intended, he managed to remind them that he was the man who overcame the crisis at the moment. Squeak. Sungwoo gripped the spear, pulled his shoulder back, and threw it at the last remaining goblin as hard as he could. Puck. The spear was stabbed right into the goblin's chest. Phew. Good. Although the skeletons, his strong subordinates, stood on guard, Sungwoo felt he needed to brush up on his combat skills just in case of contingencies. And his actual killing of the goblin planted a strong impression into the minds of those watching him. Wow. That guy is really cool. Is he the same guy who used to write something in the creative writing department? How fortunate we are. We're so fortunate to have someone like him here. After he was done fighting, Sungwoo looked askance at the bodies of the goblins. But he could not see anything sparkling like gold, which suggested items. I don't get items when I kill ordinary goblins. There were crude daggers strewn here and there, but it seemed that the items were given only when he hunted some weighty goblins like the chief goblin he had killed before. But there was a message that he could not understand, as if he earned something else. Less than since you have achieved 20 monsters killed, you have been issued a roulette ticket. Since you are the 34th person to achieve this in history, you have been upgraded to the unlimited rating. Limited to 100 people, greater than. Roulette ticket. Sungwoo could not figure out what it was right away. As there was nothing like inventory that was common in games, he could not verify who issued it. So, he decided to keep in mind the item called roulette ticket, then focused on what was going on right now. Nice job. Sungwoo spoke to the skeletons covered in blood. Of course, he said that perfunctorily because they were not humans. Tack, tack. The one-armed skeleton started gnashing its teeth again. Hey, I told you not to do that. Other skeletons were about to follow suit but stopped at his order. At that moment Jinsok shouted, "Damn bastards." Sungwoo turned his head toward Jinsok, who was clearly fuming. When he approached Jinsok, 4 skeletons covered in blood followed him in droves. Jinsok stepped back, astonished, while Minsu had already fled to the end of the cafe. "Look, don't you think I helped you?" Sungwoo said. In fact, Jinsok looked down on him a little while ago, watching him holding a crude spear. This time Jinsok nodded silently. Sungwoo went into the cafe and looked around. There was a total of 7 holding weapons, including Hano, Jinsok, and Minsu. Everybody was now looking at Sungwoo. He caught his breath, then kept silent for a moment. Quote. Actually, it was a typical tactic he used while he was in the army. A veteran master sergeant and a supplies specialist were often used. When something happened, he would gather his soldiers and keep silent momentarily, which heightened their tension amid the silence. When he said something after that, his message usually carried more weight. After he became a platoon leader, Sungwoo also used that tactic often. Of course, this kind of action needed something like authority on the part of the man who wanted to use it. In this case, Sungwoo's brilliant activities a little while ago were more than enough to replace that authority. Quote. As expected, nobody dared to speak while the silence was going on. Everybody fixed their eyes on Sungwoo as if they were waiting for him to say something. After all, Sungwoo opened his mouth. As you already saw the message, that door won't open or get broken because of a strange phenomenon. What should we do now? Is there any way for us to open it? Their attitude was quite different from the way they dealt with Jinsok. Rather than raising their complaints or shivering with nervousness, they were seeking the solution as if they were meeting an expert. In other words, they began to regard Sungwoo as a man they could trust and rely on. Sungwoo pointed to the main door with his forefinger and said, "The solution is also in the message over there. We have to catch the boss monster hiding somewhere in this building." Now they were stirred up. Then Sungwoo pointed his finger toward the ceiling. "We've only got 2 hours left. We have to catch the boss monster hiding somewhere there within 2 hours. They became silent again. "If we don't catch it, I'm not sure what will happen. But it must be very unusual. Given that the monster is strengthened, maybe something terrible will happen." At that moment, one of the men raised his hand and said, "I saw that monster." "Really?" "Yes, I saw that boss monster while I was smoking on the rooftop. I saw a very big monster appearing. Even my professor was killed by that monster." Now it was clear that the destination was the rooftop. Only I Am a Necromancer Chapter 8, Boss Monster of Humanities and Social Science Building, 2. I need more people. Is anyone else going to join me? Of course, there was no way that they would come forward. Who would willingly follow Sungwoo to fight the monster even if they were overwhelmed by Sungwoo's heroic action? Thanks to his brilliant fighting, he could openly encourage him to join him, but even those who chose the occupation cards lowered their heads and hid their weapons behind their backs. "Sungwoo, I wish I could just stay here." "No way, you should go with me." Sungwoo forcibly pulled Hanyo's arm as he was trying to go into the cafe. "You have to stand next to me to provide the buff for the skeletons." The synergy of Less Than Dagger Thieves Gang, 5, greater than took effect when Sungwoo had 5 daggers, including Hanyo's. "Let me give you my dagger." "No, I don't need it." Hano was speechless when Sungwoo resolutely declined his offer. "Even if we flocked the monster, I don't think we can expect any good results," said Jisoo-yoon, the only female volunteer wearing a red tracksuit. She seemed to be on edge, but she was still spunky. She contemptuously looked at those trying to avoid Sungwoo's eyes by all means. She continued, "Well, we might be tangled up together in the hallway, which would be really annoying. Look at those human skeletons. What's the point of taking them with us when they're less valuable than the skeletons?" Sungwoo thought her daring attitude was nothing more than reckless because nobody knew how strong the boss monster was. Anyway, it was impossible to forcibly take those indisposed for the fight, nor were they likely to be of any help. "Got it." Having said that, Sungwoo looked at Jinsok and asked, "How about you?" At his urging, Jinsok cast his glance down, then looked around as if he was embarrassed. "Well, I think I have to stay here to protect the students here, and that's the duty of the student council. Okay, I heard you. Thanks. Then stay alert and protect them well. Quote. Jinsok didn't respond at all, as if his confidence had disappeared all of a sudden. Let's go right up to the rooftop by using the elevator because we're not sure how long it will take. Oh, let's use the stairs instead. If they used the elevator, they could arrive at the rooftop at once, but there were several risks involved. They were not sure what would come out right after the elevator door opened, and they could be helplessly attacked by the monsters inside the narrow elevator. When Sungwoo began to walk up the stairs, the 4 skeletons escorted him up close. Hano followed close behind, and Jisoo, the only woman volunteer, followed right behind him, wearing a saber on her waist. She said she killed 2 goblins right after the game started. Dang it. I might be in real trouble because of you, man, Hano grumbled. Hano. What? You still don't want to join the army? Well, I wish I was already in military training camp and past day 1 if I opened my eyes now. Ah. You remember I saw some strange letters in the morning. Look, I'm right. So what's the big deal? Do you think you can change the situation now? The message in the sky that Hano said he saw in the morning could be the harbinger of the current situation. But it seemed like there was nothing he could change for now. There is one thing you can change, said Sungwoo. What is it? The day you'd be killed. Damn it. If you try to escape foolishly, you will be the first to be killed. Admiral Sun Shin Lee of the Chosun dynasty was right when he said that if you wanted to survive. But he could not afford to crack a joke anymore. Squeak. Squeak. Goblins began popping out on the stairs of the 2nd floor. Both of you confront them from the rear. When Sungwoo looked up the stairs leading to the 3rd floor, the skeletons began to attach themselves to the goblins ruthlessly. But 2 goblins rushed out of the lecture hall on the 2nd floor. Ah! Sungwoo, send me a skeleton here. While Hano was struggling to grasp the dagger in his hand, Jisoo pulled out her saber. The blade, which was about 55 centimeters long, shined brightly because of the fluorescent light. Squeak! As if to prove she cut 2 goblins, Jisoo boldly moved forward and swung the saber down on them. Her saber cut through the goblin's left eye and right ribs with one stroke. Whoosh! It was just one blow. She ignored the message, +10 gold, which appeared before her eyes, then adjusted her posture and stabbed the goblin charging toward her from the left. Puck! Obviously, she showed that anybody could easily kill the goblins as long as they stayed alert because the goblin was the weakest monster that one could kill just by smashing them with a desk. But Hano didn't hide his admiration of her skills as his mouth was agape. Her pale face was smeared with blood, but she wiped it off with the sleeve of her red tracksuit. Wow, Sungwoo, she is really cool. When Hano turned back to praise her, he saw 6 goblin bodies strewn on the floor. Ah! He was now witnessing a more brutal massacre. Sungwoo was pulling out a spear stuck in one of their bodies. Ugh! Blinking his eyes, Hano nodded and said, I'm wrong. Admiral Sun Shin Lee was right. Like the Admiral said, those who were determined to fight while risking their lives would survive, but if they hoped to survive anyway, there was a high probability that they would be killed. Why? When you leveled up, you became stronger and you would have more chances of surviving. They now succeeded in occupying the 2nd floor and went up to the 3rd. When they were about to walk up to the 4th floor, Hano found something. Sungwoo, isn't the Professor Hwang over there? Somebody was lying in one corner of the hallway with his face down. Ah, Professor. Professor. He was Professor Hwang, who had been in charge of Sungwoo's AM class. When Sungwoo rushed to him, he noticed that half his shirt was soaked with blood. Cough. Sungwoo. Yes, I'm here. Are you all right? The professor was far from okay. His right arm was cut in tatters as if it had been grounded by a mixer, so much so that there was a pool of blood under his butt. What happened to you, Professor? Sungwoo, almost all the students in my class were killed because of me. Ah. The professor began screaming hysterically as if he was having a seizure. Sungwoo tried to calm him down by gently pressing his shoulders. Please calm down. What happened? Thanks to you, my students and I fled to the research room first. Cough. Then we moved up to the rooftop because we could not stay there any longer. I just followed the contingency manual, so I insisted we move to the rooftop. Oh my god. Sungwoo murmured to himself. We found a more horrible monster there, and the students who followed me with total trust. Sungwoo didn't have to listen any further. Obviously all of them must have been killed by the boss monster. Sungwoo, never go to the rooftop, you should survive. That was his last message. Then a new message appeared before Sungwoo's eyes. Less than exclusive quest greater than. Title, Revenge for the Professor. Type, Rescue, or Neglect, the killed professor. Goal, kill the boss monster inside the building. Reward, exclusive skill. Seeing your professor dying before your eyes will make a deep sense of guilt wash over you until the last moment. As someone who has held and wielded the reins of death, you can get revenge by killing the enemy or neglecting this ordinary weak professor's death. The choice is yours. You have to follow the attacking time as set in the building. Your choice will affect your fate, greater than. Fate. Is this something like a decisive turning point? Depending on what Sungwoo chose, either rescue or neglect, it seemed that his skills would be affected. Sungwoo didn't have to mull over it. It wasn't because he felt sorry about the professor, but because he had to catch the boss monster anyway. Only I Am a Necromancer Chapter 9, Boss Monster of Humanities and Social Science Building, 3. Now Sungwoo wanted to kill the boss monster even more. Why do we have to go through this damn thing? Sungwoo had been obsessed with adapting himself to the imminent situation and seeking survival, but Sungwoo began questioning everything for the first time. Sungwoo, is it really okay for us to go to the rooftop? Even before Sungwoo replied, the skeletons went up the stairs. The door of the top floor soon appeared. Then Sungwoo flung it open. Less than you have entered the boss monster's room, greater than. Sungwoo had never climbed to the rooftop of the Humanities and Social Sciences building before. The last time he went there was when he practiced dancing because he could not find a proper place for practicing before the freshman talent show. Damn it. Right now, this place has become a sort of dungeon for the goblins. The goblins were in the thick of making a tent by using all kinds of clothes they removed from the bodies of the students with the lockers and all kinds of objects they took from the hallway as a wall. Squeak. Piling up thick textbooks here and there, they were making a fire in the plastic trash bin after ripping the books apart. Oops, he's my classmate. At one end of the rooftop they were busy taking the clothes off the bodies. One goblin was drawing a strange pattern on a dead female student's white shirt with a red marker. What the fuck? Jisoo cursed in a low voice. The three including Sungwoo stood frozen at the entrance of the rooftop. No matter how well they adapted to this crazy situation by now, they could not insensitively turn a blind eye to what was going on right before their eyes. Quote. Sungwoo felt scared all of a sudden. Why did he dare to come up to this place? On the other hand, he felt other feelings surging deep within his heart. At first, he could keep calm because he thought he was facing an uncontrollable phenomenon. But what was happening on the rooftop made him upset. Why should he or they have to go through this? However, the more he thought about it, the more cool-headed he became. After all, he knew he was weak compared to them. Phew. They were killed because they were weak, so Sungwoo, Hano, and Jisoo needed to be strong. Let's go. Right at that moment, the goblin tearing a pair of blue jeans with a dagger turned its head toward them. Squeak, squeak. When the goblin screeched, all the goblins gathered on the rooftop flocked to it. Squeak, squeak, squeak. There were about 20 of them in total. They blocked the three and expressed joy, showing their 6 smiles. Perhaps they seemed to think they outnumbered Sungwoo and the other two. Sungwoo, how about escaping this time? But even before Hano finished his words, the skeletons rushed forward. Put up a strong resistance. Reflecting Sungwoo's intuition, the 4 skeletons stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking the entrance to the rooftop. At the same time, Sungwoo lifted his left hand. Then the red bracelets, Madness of the Wilderness on his wrist responded immediately. Woo-wong. Less than the Madness of the Wilderness has been activated. For 10 minutes, attack damage increase, plus 10%, and attack speed, plus 20%, will be rewarded to you, greater than. The hollow eyes of the skeletons sparkled brightly, and their hands were empowered with energy spirits. Right at that moment, the goblins charged toward the skeletons like a herd of angry wild dogs. But the skeletons, standing firmly at the entrance, resisted their attack. While blocking their attack with their left forearms, the skeletons inflicted deep stabs with their daggers. Their attack speed is obviously very fast. Puck, 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 puck. When the goblins mounted an attack, the skeletons fought back with double the force. Even the force on the tips of the blades was clearly visible in Sungwoo's eyes, which helped them pierce through not only the goblins' swords but also their knucklebones carrying the swords. And that led to their instant deaths. The first 4 goblins fighting at the forefront fell down in 3 seconds. Just think of these skeletons as our shield. Shouting like that, Sungwoo heaved his spear over the skulls of the skeletons. The skeletons, which were 120 centimeters tall, served as a sort of barricade. Thanks to them, Sungwoo and the other 2 could freely attack the goblins safely and unilaterally outside their attack range. Jisoo, who was tall, reached out and wielded her saber over the skeletons. But Hanno, who was holding a dagger, was standing in the back blankly. Damn it. I thought I chose the good stuff, but these are swarming with maggots. Hanno picked up 2 daggers just in case, but they were useless. Oh my. In an act of desperation, Hanno threw one of the daggers at the goblins. Puck. Ugh. It directly hit a goblin's forehead standing in the rear. It fell to the ground immediately. Oh, I hit him. Didn't I do well? During his middle school days, the so-called chopstick throwing game was popular among students. Their target was the outer wall of the school, but they were caught by the principal and given harsh discipline. Ever since then, they no longer played the game. Looking back, it was the only moment Hanno emerged as the strongest winner in the game. Now that he gained confidence, Hanno drew another dagger and threw it quickly at the goblins. This time, he accurately hit the forehead of a goblin standing at a distance. For him, it was a very easy 2 kills. I've found my talent. When the 3 fiercely attacked with the skeletons standing at the forefront, the goblins were visibly hesitant as if their fighting spirit had been broken. Squeak, squeak. Less than the goblins have been weakened after smelling the smell of death, first stage. Stats have been reduced by 30%, greater than. Finally, the smell of death curse was set in motion. It seemed to have been restricted when their morale was high, but when they seized the chance to win, it immediately showed its effects. Rattle, rattle. Now it was time for Sungwoo and the other 2 to flank the goblins. As soon as Sungwoo made the decision, the skeletons who were resisting in one place moved their feet. Then they began to advance with their attack. Squeak, squeak. Stunned by their overwhelming force that turned the tide, the goblins now began to step back and dispersed everywhere. In other words, they defeated the goblins. But a shadow wiggled with some phlegm in its throat behind the makeshift wall made with the lockers. Something swiftly began walking out with long strides. Squeak, squeak. The tide of the battle was turned again. The goblins retreating in fear shouted hooray and worshipped it while bowing. It was obviously also a goblin, but it was respected by other goblins. At a glance, it was quite a big goblin that was different from others. The goblin was about 170 centimeters tall, and it was wearing a baseball jumper with the symbol of a hotel business department inscribed on its right chest. And its muscular body was wiggling through the open jumper. Well, that must be the boss monster. Phew, said Hanno. Catching his breath, Hanno lifted a dagger. The boss goblin lifted a big stick, roaring with a loud voice. At the same time, the other goblins who were scared a little while ago repositioned themselves with murderous expressions. Squeak. With the smell of death curse lifted right away, the goblins fiercely sprang at them like religious fanatics. Rattle. Rattle. Kill them all. When Sungwoo gave the order, the skeletons attacked them. The goblins were no match for them. Puck. 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 The several remaining goblins collapsed the moment they clashed with the skeletons. Of course, Sungwoo knew early on that they were not the real problem. Puck. One of the skulls was thrown over the railing with a thud. Move back, Sungwoo shouted. It was too late, though. Although it was an ordinary blow, the skeleton in question was broken into pieces with that blow. Given the skeleton's structural build, it was susceptible to such an attack. Less than the dead have become your subordinate under your authority, greater than. Less than the dead have become your subordinate under your authority, greater than. Only I Am a Necromancer Chapter 10, Boss Monster of Humanities and Social Science Building, 4. In no time, 2 skeletons were resurrected among the goblins' bodies to replace the perished skeletons, but one of them was immediately smashed to pieces with a heavy blow the moment it stood up. Its skull was thrown towards Sungwoo, but he barely avoided it. It hit the door of the rooftop, then shattered. The bodies of the goblins, which became the material of the skeletons, were strewn everywhere, but it was impossible to resurrect all of them indefinitely. Less than mana, 20/30ths, greater than. Damn it, my mana. The required number of mana per skeleton was 5 points, and only 4 skeletons could be created at the moment. Of course, there was a steady increase in mana, but that alone was not enough. Swoosh. Puck. Right at that moment, something was thrown at the chief goblin, but it barely blocked it by lifting its left hand. Oh, you blocked it. An old goblin dagger was stabbed into its forearm. Hanno threw it, but it didn't seem to inflict any significant damage. But veins stood out on its forehead. Oh, that bastard was hit, right? Yep, you hit it. Hanno stepped back, frightened, but the chief goblin began to charge toward him at full speed. It sprung up at him, lifting the heavy club with both hands. The goblin was threatening enough to make Hanno scream. Ah! Ah! Rattle! At that moment, the skeletons came running and blocked the attack, and Hanno fled away quickly. Oops! Thanks, guys. But the chief goblin's strike smashed 3 skeletons instantly. The one-armed skeleton, the only survivor, had one of its ribs ripped apart when it was caught by the tip of the chief goblin's club. Undaunted by the impact, the skeleton lowered its head and stabbed the dagger into the top of the goblin's foot. Puck. With a screech, the chief goblin kicked the skeleton with its other foot, which threw the skeleton to the locker on the other side. Sungwoo felt heartbroken to see its skull cracked by the shock. Then he confirmed that Jisoo was sneaking behind its back. He tried not to watch her so she would not be caught. She now wielded the saber at it, which caused a long cut on its back. If it had not moved or sensed her attack at the last moment, she could have beheaded it. Dang it, I could have killed that monster. Smacking her lips, she stepped back and shook her saber in the air to dust it off. That girl is not an ordinary woman. Obviously, the way she brandished the saber was far from normal. Sungwoo was aware that because she was wearing a tracksuit, she was a graduate of the College of Physical Education, but he also felt something extraordinary in her sword skills. Her constant brandishing of the sword was clearly a strategic move to throw the chief goblin into confusion. I should also move strategically. Soon, the 3 skeletons that he resurrected by using 15 mana surrounded it. He made sure they distanced themselves so that they could not be smashed all at once by the club. Anyway, we 3 are the main attackers. I have to use the skeletons as the shields to stop the boss monster from jumping at us. The boss monster curled up, bleeding all over its body. It seemed to have taken up a defensive position because its hasty attack backfired. Attack it from behind. When Sungwoo thought about it, the skeleton behind the boss monster moved. Of course, it could not mount an ambush because it was gnashing its teeth. The moment the monster wielded the club, Sungwoo quickly hurled his spear. The timing was good, but the spear barely passed by its left ear. However, its outer ear was broken apart, with blood dripping down its shoulder. Raging with anger, the boss monster charged toward the skeleton nearby and wielded the club. Sungwoo told the skeleton to avoid the attack quickly, but the monster was much faster. Less than not enough mana, greater than. Less than mana, 3/30, greater than. Damn it. He had used the remaining mana to resurrect another skeleton, but that was it. Now there were only 3 skeletons left. Noticing that, the boss monster looked around, the light in its eyes changing. Actually, it was counting the remaining skeletons. Then it let out a disgusting laugh peculiar to a goblin, which suggested that it believed that it had seized the chance to win. Ugh! Laughing at us. You bastard, get this. Hanno quickly threw a dagger at the monster, but the goblin lifted the club high to block the dagger easily. Hanno, why did you utter something when you attacked it? Aha! Sungwoo looked around with a sigh. One of the 3 including him could be killed if this fight dragged on. If the boss monster could keep fighting despite its serious wounds, all of them could be killed. Now I know why it's the boss monster. I need a decisive blow to kill it. Let me check the weapons first. Sungwoo fortunately found a couple of long swords near the all-in-one desk in one corner. It seemed that somebody who had chosen the swordmaster occupation was killed by the boss monster. He furtively approached the desk and grabbed the 2 swords and ordered in his mind. 2 of you, charge toward it. Rattle. The 2 skeletons simultaneously attacked the boss monster from the left and right, but the boss brandished the club with a faint smile. They were smashed even before they were close enough. But at that moment, something was thrown over its head. It was a long sword which flew over its head and dropped on the other side. Actually, it landed in somebody's hand safely, who was none other than the one-armed skeleton. It waddled as it held the sword that was as tall as itself. And Sungwoo also held another sword in his hand on the other side. Less than thanks to your team play, the synergy effect is now active, greater than. Less than synergy list. Warrior, first stage. Classification, weapon synergy. Condition, equipped with 3 swords. Effect, increase attack speed, plus 10%, reduce weapon weight, minus 50%, greater than. It was the synergy created by the mix of the 3 swords between Sungwoo, Jisoo, and Hanno. A yellow energy aura was visible on the blades of their swords. But there appeared another synergy, which was quite unexpected. Less than one-armed warrior. Classification, individual synergy. Condition, equip one arm with a sword greater than. Blue energy aura was visible on the skeleton's remaining arm and its blade. Good. Hanno, when you attack the boss monster, don't say anything. Only make a sound when you are certain that you can kill it. Got it. Really? Hanno looked at him with a strange expression. He was lifting something laboriously that had a sword on the side. Get this hellish all-in-one desk. Lifting it over his head quickly, Sungwoo charged toward the boss monster. It was his first weapon that killed goblins with one blow in the past. Jisoo and the one-armed skeleton also moved simultaneously. Who the hell made this terrible invention for? The students' question and resentment of this all-in-one desk prompted angry responses around the campus in the past. But it was only today that Sungwoo felt its use keenly. This is the best blunt weapon and shield. He had already killed 3 goblins with the blunt desk. And this time, he was rushing to the boss monster while holding that heavy desk over his head. How could he dash with that heavy desk? Obviously, the boss monster was embarrassed. Caught between a rock and a hard place, it assumed an awkward defensive posture. If it made a wrong move, Jisoo or the one-armed skeleton's attack would definitely land on him. But it had made a bad choice. It didn't realize until then that getting stabbed would have been better. Swoosh. The moment the heavy desk made of strong boards and iron was thrown at its head, the boss monster realized that it could not block the desk. Although it covered its head with its hands, it staggered with the impact, and Jisoo quickly cut its right thigh. It hurriedly turned to the right, but this time the one-armed skeleton stabbed the monster's ribs. Blood was gushing from its side, soaking the ground with blood under its feet.